when we do back floating, you want to be very careful. You want to do it nice and slow. You're going to make sure your child feels nice and secure. Okay? Hold them in nice and secure, cheek to cheek. I'm going to get my other hand right under the lower back, and I'm going to slowly back up. Okay? Just like this. We don't want to trigger the riding reflex. Okay? Just nice and slow on your shoulder. Once they get from here, you can move your hand to the back of their head, fingers pointing down. The other hand sliding to the back of the head, fingers pointing down, tilting the head back. And I want to make sure that I block any sun that might be in their face and that they can see my face right here. A couple other things you can do to help out. You can take your hand and you can create a little bit of a flow underneath their back, and also that helps them too. From here, let go. And that's back floating.
The next thing I want to talk about is the back float. The back float can be a very difficult skill to do with a real child, so there are some things that you need to know to make sure you can be successful. Thing number one, when you first start, you want to make sure that the child feels secure. So when you're down low and the child is straight up and down, you have that feeling of security. Here's what's a common mistake of a lot of parents. I'm going to start like this. Notice the child's body position is flat. That's where we're going to be eventually, but that's not how we want to start. We want to start straight up and down. That way the child feels like they're just sitting with you and they're very secure. Now here's the other thing. A child's going to lift their head as you go backwards if you move too quickly. So the first thing is, make sure you're going very slow. The second thing is, notice where my hand is on their head. Oftentimes with a real child, a parent will get an arm that gets stuck out here while they're holding. That's okay if you're only in this phase. However, if you want to move to the next phase, notice how the arm's getting caught. You can't successfully get where you need to go with the arm that gets caught out. So be careful to watch for parents that let that child's arm stay out when they're leaning back with them. It's going to cause a problem with the process. So to make sure it's smooth transition, baby's arms should be in the front. That way as you do lean backwards and you go to that next step, the baby's arms are already out and it's not causing you a hindrance. The next thing you want to think about is as you get to that phase where the baby's out and you're not cheek to cheek anymore, you keeping eye contact with the baby is going to make the most success. So you have to think about using your chin on their head as an anchor. At this stage right here, this is when you're going to have the most resistance from a new back-floating child. So we may have head coming up, we may have feet coming up, but as long as you have your chin on the anchor and your hands on the back of their head, they can wiggle their body as much as they want, but you have them secure. The next part is you want to make sure that you're looking down at the baby. When you're doing the skill, the eye contact is going to make you successful. So it would be here the whole time. Now if you have a child that's ready to back float on their own, eye contact is key. Make sure that they lock eyes with you and that they don't see you lean backwards. The more you lean backwards, the less they feel like you're still there with them. So if you're here and you're right close to them, you can let go and they'll float on their own and think you're still holding them. Hovering over the child and continuing that eye contact as well as using your anchor are going to be key factors to make the back float work for you. Another tip for the back float would be for that child that's great at back floating with the parent. You can get them all the way out to the one hand. Maybe you can even get them to back float draft, but they're not quite back floating on their own. What do you do to get them to actually take that last step where they are back floating completely by themselves? So one trick that's going to help you do this is to use a pushing water technique. You take your hands and put them under the water and you push really hard. You'll start to see that it makes sort of a fountain. Since babies are already quite buoyant and they don't weigh a lot, this fountain can easily hold up a child in the backflow position without you touching them, but they have to balance on top of this fountain so that they actually have to do it themselves. That balancing technique on the fountain of water is actually going to mimic the same balancing technique that they'll need to do in still water to backfloat on their own. So for instance, we'd start from phase 1. We would go back. We've got our comfortable child that is perfectly fine on one hand. Now before I let go, I'm going to begin my push. When I feel like they're ready, I'm going to put my other hand down and I'm going to start pushing until the baby is held. Oftentimes when you first try this, the child is going to slightly fall under the water, even though you're pushing. So you want to make sure that you give that child and you tell the parent that you're going to give him that chance to find his way back up to the top. So a real child might fall under, they might be kicking around, but as long as you're pushing, they're going to come to the top, they may be wiggling, and they're going to stabilize. If you don't give them that chance to wiggle it out and find the surface, they won't really ever do it on their own. So if this is done correctly, this is a great way to get even a 6-month-old to float by themselves.